Good morning. We can start with Luciano Berriatoa. I give him the floor and I thank him very much for participating and being here with us. I apologize. I will be speaking French because my English is terrible. Italian, very little. So I'll be speaking French. I am very happy to be here with you. In this moment, the fact of being able to belong to the world and being in the world is a formidable fact. I dealt with the work of Nosferatu. Nosferatu is a film that has been restored many times, in fact, too many times. But every time there are some problems, there are things that are not perfect. So maybe it's needed, it's necessary to make more and more restoration work. It's an endless work, a film that already had very many problems at the time, because the rights for Dracula had not been paid. Brian Stoker, to Brian Stoker, to the wife, and so they had to make the destruction of all prints of the film. So only a couple, some abstracts. Only one that was left out of the time, and it's a color print. And it belonged to the French distributor. At that time, it was normal to shoot various versions of the film with different cameras, but that was not the case for Nosferatu. All we found was done through material of Nosferatu. When we found the color print, the French one, we said, "Oh well, now we can know exactly how the film was." But maybe it's and it's a sort of a late material. What do I mean by late? In the world of silent films, it means that maybe they are prints that have been printed weeks or even maybe months after the release of the film. And the print that was made for the film's release was heavily damaged. There were scratches, cut scenes, So we had to redo the editing to try and eliminate small defects. Because maybe some material is missing. But this was immediately after the release. It's very, very important to date the materials that are found to understand whether they come from a first, second, or third print. That's why it's important not to lose all information existing about all these materials. For instance, the scratches, we did a digital work on them, and the trend is to clean up the images, to take away these lines and these scratches. But this means also losing some information if a negative in a certain historical moment would prove to be heavily damaged. Whereas if we keep the materials that hold on to the materials that are damaged, we have the possibility of dating these filmic elements. But there are also other information that you risk to lose during a restoration, because the only thing that we copy on the print that is being created in the scanning, well, you risk with the scanner to eliminate all info that are on the edges, because what you're interested in is mainly the frames, but the margin, the edges are very important because they contain a lot of information. Because this way, from the edges, we can understand and know whether a print had been made in a laboratory or elsewhere. And in the case of Nosferatu, this is extremely important. Because when we decided, in fact, when they decided to destroy the film, well, we had the first material out of the lab and we sent it out to a second lab. This lab had different machines for printing the prints, and all these are information that we can find on the edges of the frames. In the case of Nosferatu, we can have problems because we know that this print comes from France. And we can learn that this material was found in 1928. We presented it in Paris in 1924. So in the edges, we can see that the material was agfa material, positive. But this positive agfa material, well, you can read on the edge the name agfa. Well, this is clear. But what you have to do is to date this agfa material. And when it was issued, that's why it's very important to be able to recover all information on the film stock. You have to proceed with the dating of the entire material. That's why for years and years, after the first restoration of Nosferatu in 2004, in 2006, sorry. It was important to see all this information to be able to date all the activities that were performed on the stock.
On l'a utilisé plusieurs fois, mais on l'a utilisé dans des années très différentes.
And the use was and with Aqua, we used it in for different years during the 20s, of course, but also in the 40s and the 60s.
Mais aussi, il y a l'idée de que c'est pas possible de dater.
But there is also the idea that there is the idea of the fact that it's not possible to date ACFA materials. When this publishing appeared, or when it was printed,
AFA, c'est toujours les mêmes écritures
they wrote
jusqu'à
that
1924,
the ACFA was present up to 1924, 1925.
Mais c'est pas vrai.
And before the AGFA, the AGFA was pointy, whereas it was cut. But with different materials, see that the AGFA of 1921 is different. So the A is different from the A that was written in 1922, and different also from the one that was in 1923.
Ça veut dire que chaque fois qu'on fait un stock de AFA, on va changer.
So every time you analyze an AGFA film, you change the info that you find on the edge. This is a very interesting fact. This way, we are able to know what year the print we have in our hands, what year it belongs to. So, as I said, we can know for sure what is the date of that ACFA material we have in our hands. There are information all over on the materials, and this analysis is work that we had not done up to that moment. The problem is that in order to recover information, you have to work in film libraries, in the archives. Having a vision of materials of all times in order to be able to make comparisons. The problem is that there were American materials and as well as English, above all. So there were also information that we could not process. So starting from these indications, we can see that the French print of Nosferatu is a print that is ACFA of the first film that was available, so 1921. So in 1921 they started putting these information, these indications on the edge of the film. Maybe it was done in the very moment and it was formidable. So we can see, we know where. The point is, even if we can decipher this information, we have to know that the material of agua material of 1921 has been used for some years to follow. And the print, was it made in France or in Germany?
La copie française, on l'a fait avec des machines.
So the print, the French print was made with the machines, with equipment that are not the same as the one that we can find on the film, and it's interesting. And it's interesting to know that during the shooting, we have used sometimes negative to show phantoms. So this material that was shot to show the negative. Well, we can see it because we made a reproduction that was slightly smaller to insert it in the frame, and you find this on the edge.
La fenêtre de la machine à positiveur, et nous pouvons voir.
So a reduction in the machine of the positive has been made, and so we can see whether the small triangle there was a machine at the very first moment that had a system that was different. To see these references, so we see well, this information have come from a second laboratory. Well, the first lab is an easy thing to identify, is easily identifiable because because they were done for the scenes of Nosferatu, and so in 1924, and we had a material that was materials to be destroyed, but actually instead of being destroyed, it was passed on to another lab, all this material. And we have to know where this laboratory was located in order to attribute the right date to the material. So we have to understand whether the French color is the unique, the only color print, whether the color is right or not. So we consulted also a second lab with a different rendering of the color. So starting from here, I wrote a book in which I have elaborated the prints for the editing. I'm going to show you some of these books. I'll try to share my screen with you.
Alors, je ne sais pas si j'ai comparti ou non. Oui, parce que dites qu'on a éliminé la possibilité de compartir.
It tells me that it's impossible to share the screen. Maybe this is the problem. I wanted to share the screen with you. Can you help me?
On peut voir?
Now it works. We can share.
Un peu. Bam, 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 bam. C'est un PDF. Bam, 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 bam. Alors.
It's a PDF, and I scroll it down with you.
Ça, c'est le travail de Harold Brown.
This is the work. This is the work by Harold Brown. Harold Brown. You see the Kodak codes with the list of the years. Fuji. Harold Brown says that Agfa starts in the 20s. And that in 1924 the letters are smaller. So he gives all the information, and we see some samples so we can see the differences. I hope you can see them well. These belong to 1921. And here we see the writing, Agfa, and you can see the difference between the writings of 1921 and 1922. Also the G is different. Here we see it squared, whereas here you see it rounded. At that time there is an expansion, and the extension of the perforations. You see here we have 3 perforations per frame. Afterwards you will see the example of 1923. F is different. And 1924, 23, the extension, it's longer. Then we have 1924. In 1924 they are much larger. And then in 1925 we see a pointy A, whereas above the A had been cut. Whereas here you see a pointy A. And then you see that the characteristics, then characteristics repeat themselves in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Zeiss icon, same thing for this material. The info comes from the writing Zeiss icon. And this applies to the first original version of Nosferatu. So in the 30s, the writing was Zeiss, and this is the Spanish version of Nosferatu. The late version, the late Spanish version. In the 40s, things change, and you see the German print of Nosferatu. And you see that the differences are all over. But one has to analyze all this material to attribute the right dates. You see here with Gebert, information change. And we can see how already in the 50s we see these pointy letters. 3 points. And what does this mean? Well, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm clueless. Because to have an idea, you have to process a lot of material, analyze it, and make comparison studies. But this material that I'm showing you only applies to Nosferatu. Here we see Kodak AG. We have to know when the version of Nosferatu in Germany was made during Nazism, because starting the print starting from the analysis of analysis in Ljubljana, we assessed two versions, one shorter, one longer one. And these versions had been sent from Germany to the French Cinematheque, and there is a print that finally at the very end reached Lausanne. So here we need to date these differences in the AG Kodak stock. So maybe we can have an idea. The idea here is 1941, Kodak France. Well, this is a real problem, the one of the dating. And it was necessary to see what existed in the French Cinematheque, because we saw that there are very many materials of Kodak France. In Barcelona, Spain, there are few materials of Kodak France. But it was necessary to date this material. And all this regards Nosferatu.
Et ça, c'est, dire, on a besoin d'étudier toutes les copies qui existent de ces films pour
So the idea is to use all the existing prints
ou bien de ces copier matériel esthétique. Mais parce
to
que
date the
vous
material
savez que
copies.
dans le cinéma muet, il y avait plusieurs versions. Bien, ce sont matériel de Nosferatu.
This is Nosferatu's material.
C'est ça qui existe. Vous pouvez voir par exemple dans les
This is the existing
photos
material.
nitrate qu'il y a un alpha. Et c'est un alpha de premier moment. Mais ce alpha est dans un titre.
There is the Agfa writing as in the first version, but this Agfa can be found.
Pas en Allemagne. Et il y avait ce matériel alpha dès le premier moment, à ce moment, en France. Et comme ça, nous pouvons penser que peut-être il y a beaucoup d'informations
And we can think that maybe there are lots of information.
nous pouvons penser que peut-être la version
We can
inclue
think
que nous
that
avons de
maybe,
ce film, c'est version détaillée, ça veut dire
and we can think that the color version of this print is belongs to later on, maybe 1924. And then
en ce moment que tout le monde
and
va
we can
apercevoir
do
le
the
film déjà,
tinting in France.
c'est possible d'avoir envoyé
So in this moment,
France. Bien. C'est de l'histoire.
is it possible to send this negative to France? Well, this is a mystery.
Toutes las indications montrent ces possibilités. Bien.
All indication.
Ici, maintenant,
Let's get out of here.
alors, je suis une autre fois. Hein? Alors, le problème, c'est que nous ne savons presque rien d'où vient tout ce matériel de Nosferatu. C'est très curieux parce que
Where does
on a
all
envoyé
this material come from?
quelques photogrammes que
We have some frame now to show you. A Czech copy appeared in 1938, I think, when the Nazis entered the Czech Republic. Well, they found this print.
Presque la seule chose qu'on trouvait.
This Czech print, it was the only thing that the Nazis found, and therefore. And we have integrated this print with other. We have remade the re-editing. And all the subtitles or intertitles that we knew about the film come from the short print, the German short version. And then it was combined with the Czech version. So we should find out what happened and what they did in Germany at the time. We found a letter of indications on how to make subtitles in German. We managed to attribute a date to this document, and this information was supplied to the lab. In 1942, I don't really remember. And at this point, we can also put a date on the print of the French version, on the French print. Langlois did not like colors in the film. He liked black and white, he didn't like colors, that's why we can see Nosferatu. And the colors have been eliminated. That's why Langlois used to say that you had to see the film in total silence with no music, no background music. These are the thoughts of some people that in that moment were in charge of the handling and management of the film. So at the end there was a combination of versions. So the late version of the 30s was accepted. And appeared. And someone found in Germany print, but of a very bad quality. So a new sound version was created. 24 images per second. And the film was short, so Langlois accepted a print of this film because he thought the film was more complete with a lot of documentation. But the curious thing about it was that in France, so there was a total chaos because there were late contributions in France. So that's the problem. It's very interesting to work on such a film, but one has to reconstruct everything has to all information has to be put together because otherwise and we know that also the is incomplete and it doesn't give a possibility. And so so all the captions or the titles are numbered. and in the literature. At the time,
même pour la distribution, on a mutilé, on a éliminé des morceaux de film. Et ça, on l'a fait.
and we have seen that in France, some parts of the film have been mutilated, and this have been done all over. In the case of Faust,
Notre film avec tous ces problèmes multipliés partout. Le problème, c'est qu'il y a un matériel perdu que peut-être ça était
the problem is that there is a material. It was the first German version, and there were only small parts along with another version. And here you can see that it deals with which many screenings have been made, but there is only a positive, and it's a UFA that has done the same thing. They have made many prints, and then the preservation of the second negative may be shot with another camera. And finally, many films we can have of the 20s, and maybe it's not the best version. Maybe the ugliest version, and the only one, and then prints and screenings have been done one after the other. So it's quite complicated. So it was complex to make the films. It doesn't matter what. But it's a continuous work. And you can work for years and years because you always find something. But you have to preserve all information and preserve materials because it's very important. Even more important than restoration. Today we don't have the possibility of interpreting many information. I don't know if I have come to the end of my presentation. Is there someone listening to me? Is there? No, there is nobody listening to me? No.
Mais finalement, on doit terminer la session aussi parce qu'on a une autre rencontre près.
We have to close down the meeting because we have another meeting. Are there any questions? I believe that your conversation, your talk has been very clear because nobody has any questions to ask you. So we want to thank you very much. We miss you a lot here, and we were really sorry not to have seen you here at the festival. But we hope that next year we will see you there. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I like a lot to speak about this. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you. Greetings to you by the way.
Sì, 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 mi spiaceva